So today's guest is Shea Butler. I don't want to bury the lead on this one, so I'm not going to. She is a passionate traveler who divides her time between Washington State, Vancouver, and Los Angeles. She was born in Cairo, Egypt, to American parents living abroad. Okay, here's the lead. Her most awe-inspiring trip was a horseback riding safari through Botswana. Nothing like being charged by two lions to get your creative juices flowing. Okay, I can't wait to talk about that. She was also on a polo team that won the National Indoor Arena 5 Gold Championship. But in addition to all of these adventures, she's a television and film writer and author, an award-winning director, writer, producer. Her short stories have been published in magazines and anthologies and are available via the audiobook Transitions, Stories of Mystery, Murder, and Speculative Fiction. She is currently writing her first novel, a murder mystery set in the swamps outside of New Orleans. She's a member of the Television Academy, Film Independent, Sisters in Crime, and Mystery Writers of America, and she believes no matter what your age, you should pursue your dreams. Welcome to the program, Shea.
I'm so thrilled to be here.
Well, I want to get to your professional accolades in a moment, but first, I want to discuss your adventurous spirit. Obviously, it sounds like you've done some amazing things.
Mhm.
And just like I said in the open, you went on this trip to Botswana. Tell us about that.
I love to travel, but I also love horses. I love camping out with them, going on trail rides. And I went with my sister and two friends on a horseback riding safari through the Okavango Delta in Botswana. And the Okavango Delta is a 50,000 acre World Heritage site. So there's no villages, no real roads, just dirt tracks through it, and it's overseen by the World Heritage Foundation. And it was amazing. They were semi permanent tents, very small camp. I think there's 10 throughout the whole uh, Delta, and some are horseback riding combined with going into trucks and going further afield, and some are just the normal get in a jeep or a truck and go trekking and looking for animals. But we would get up at 6 a.m. in the morning and go out to the campfire. And then by 7, we were on the horses and we would ride for 4 hours, come back, have lunch, do a little siesta, and then go out in the evening before it got dark for a couple hours. It's a whole other way of looking at the terrain and the animals because you're on horses, that seems more natural to them. Amazing, life-changing.
Were you ever scared? Because it sounds like you did come in contact with wildlife.
You are in contact with wildlife. You're riding, sometimes the elephants are 20 feet away. With the elephants, or non-meat eating animals, we were told on horseback, it's a territorial thing. So if they seem aggressive, back away. But with lions and leopards and meat eating animals, it's like a cat with a mouse. If the mouse freezes, they kind of lose interest. So we were coming out of a stand of trees, and there was this big field. And as we came into it, this two half-grown baby lions bolted out of the brush. And then here comes mama lion, here comes daddy lion. That was when I got scared because they turned and they were not happy that we were there. You could hear the huff, the every hair on the back of my neck stood straight up, and you realized we are not, the top of the food chain. And the mother lion was really angry, and they're the ones that go out and get the food. Daddy lions are kind of lazy and hang out. And he wasn't that interested in us. She charged. And as she charged, all our horses whirled around to bolt. Can't really blame him. But our guide, who was the only one with a gun, yelled, "Hold." And we all pulled up and turned to face them. But really what saved us was his horse misbehaved, reared up, fell to the ground, and he said all he wanted was to grab that rifle. And I got a picture because, of course, I had my camera and was snapping photos. And he's standing there with the rifle in one hand, the reins of his horse in the other, and in the distance was Daddy Lion. He had just frozen. And he said later it was because it scared them. Their prey doesn't act like that. They don't rear up and fall down on the ground. And so it startled them and stopped them. But he said in the 15 years that he had been guiding people, that had never happened. But yes, I was scared.
So you were lucky. You were definitely lucky.
And we followed his instructions. There were 6 of us, and not one of us kept going.
You did
He
what he
said,
told you to do. Yeah, that
mhm,
makes a lot of sense.
mhm,
So I love that you are writing a mystery novel, your first one at
mhm,
age 68, which
mhm.
obviously kind of dovetails from your experience in Africa because you are a risk taker. You're adventurous. You're somebody that doesn't shy away from a challenge. Talk to me about just your writing career and how it led you to this.
I always loved stories, whether it was a book or television. My mother read every night to my sister and I, and really instilled a love of the written word and stories. And my parents encouraged us to go out and explore the world, not be shy. And because of my interest in that and in writing, uh, I would dabble in it in junior high and high school, as you do. And I went and got my undergraduate degree in literature, and then was going to become a journalist. And I was going to get my master's in journalism. And the first week I was at school at San Diego State University, I had to sign up for an elective, and I signed up for television writing and changed my major after the first class. And I like the novels, I like the mysteries, whether it's television, film, or books. But I followed that path to Hollywood and, I had a little bit of success. I'm a member of the Writers Guild, sold a few television scripts, but never really broke out. So, it wasn't something that I was making my full living at. But because of that, I kind of put the narrative on the backtrack. But I was always interested in writing a novel, and I finally said, "What are you waiting for?" But the narrative writing for a novel is very different than for television or movie scripts. So I took a class on short story writing because I needed to learn how to write narrative. And I wrote my first short story and submitted it to different magazines, and it got bought and sold. Needed more practice, did a second, third, fourth, and fifth one. They all got bought and got published, and I put them out in the audiobook, and then I finally said, "Okay, stop doing the short stories. You That was a stepping stone." And so now I'm deep into my first novel, and it's so exciting. I'm really, uh, having fun with it.
Yeah, talk about the topic for this novel.
The topic for this novel, it's murder mystery, serial killer, and it's called A Confine of Bones. And basically, when the main character is a police detective in a small uh, town along the swamps outside of New Orleans, and bones are discovered in the swamp. And what they realize is that it's a burial place for multiple bodies. And so it's really the murder mystery and finding out who the serial killer is. And of course, there's romance in there. And um, she, be, of course, ends up being in danger. But she grew up in the swamps. Her name is Vic. And it's really her getting in touch with who she is and learning to accept that. all interweaved with a murder mystery.
And have you spent time in New Orleans? I mean, where did you get the idea to set it there?
I was outlining the general idea, but there's a ghost involved too, of course. And I had just gone down to New Orleans, and the feel of it just felt correct for the idea of the a ghost and the swamp, and it's a eerie place, and I wanted that feel to it.
What's the difference? You mentioned that you had done TV and film writing. What do you think the biggest difference is with that between that and narrative writing?
In narrative writing, you're inviting your audience in and telling them a little bit of what's going on. You're describing the atmosphere, and you're letting them know what the characters are thinking. But when you're writing scripts, you kind of taught you need to show, not tell, because the actors and the directors, the art directors, the wardrobe, the costume designers, they all bring their creative juices to it as well. So when you read a script, it's first of all in the present tense. It's written in the present tense, and you're not doing paragraphs and paragraphs of description. You're not telling the audience, because the audience is, it's a visual medium. So they're watching it. So you have to show on the screen what's going on. Whereas when you're reading a novel or a short story, you're kind of curled up on your couch, and the author needs to tell you what's going on because you can't watch it. And they're telling you that so you can imagine it in your brain.
You can see
And
it so that you can be there, actually. It's
exactly.
interesting because I write novels. I've written nonfiction. I write mystery novels, but I also now do podcasts. I've done some narrative true crime. And one of
Mhm.
the biggest things is being able to put the listener in that moment, and you
Right.
do it with sound, but you also do it with description. You describe the
Mhm.
location, you describe the people, and it's a real challenge to make sure they can see it. And I think that's a good point.
Mhm.
You're also working on a film. It deals with homelessness and teenagers. Talk about that a little.
I have stepped into directing, which I also love, but I've been doing short films and a web series, and I wanna branch out into television and feature films. And be just like with the short stories, I had done multiple short stories. They had sold. It was time to up my game. That's what is going on with this movie. I'd done 3 short films as a writer, director, producer, and a web series, a 7-episode web series. And now it's time to up my game in that. And so I wrote a low budget indie movie, teen coming of age romance, but it's set on the homeless streets of LA. And it's called Dare, and it's touches on teen homelessness, the importance of staying in school, and a difference between the have and have nots. And ultimately, it's really about family and understanding that you can have a family that you create as well as the family that you're born into.
Yeah, and such an important topic right now.
Hmm.
Every city in America, is trying to figure out how to compassionately help people who are unhoused, whether they are mentally ill, whether they have drug addiction, whether, in the case of teenagers, maybe they've been kicked out of the house,
Exactly.
lost their income, things like that. So that's a
Hmm.
really important topic. What do you think, or if you could share any experiences that you've had as a woman writing over the years, producing, directing, that have been more difficult, maybe harder to overcome because you're a woman?
I because came into Hollywood or television or even the workforce at a time when women were still not considered executive material or leadership material. And so there was always just an assumption that, you know, you couldn't do it, or it was too tough, or you're just not equipped. Why? That's a whole other conversation. But what I found is that the doors just weren't open to you, and there was an assumption that that's all you were good for, to be, uh, a secretary or an assistant or a lower level manager, and it doesn't matter what, um, part of the workforce you were in. But I remember I got out of grad school and went up to Hollywood, and I didn't know anyone. So I was cold calling, I was looking for jobs, I had signed up with temp agencies and things along that line. And I went in for an interview for a receptionist for a production company. And the person interviewing me said, "Do you give good phone?" Now, the sexual connotation behind that was amazing. Now, obviously, they really couldn't get away with it today. But back then, just the way he said that was such a sexual flavor to it. It was like, what?
What year was this, if you remember, or around what year, Shay?
Um, it was early 80s.
Okay, so
Yeah,
not that long ago.
no.
And how old were you, and where had you come from? You mentioned graduate school.
I had just graduated with a master's from San Diego State University in television and film communication, and had driven up to Hollywood and got an apartment and didn't know anyone, and was looking for my way into the industry because I had decided that I wanted to be part of that industry. And so that was the time. It was normal for the time, but I was brought up not to have limitations. And my parents just encouraged us to follow our dreams, that there were no boundaries for it. My older sister was a lawyer, and it was just expected that if you wanted to follow your dream, follow what you wanna do, to do it.
Yeah,
And
and I
I
think,
just
like you said, you mentioned that was the time, which is
Mhm.
so crazy to think about that,
Exactly.
in the '80s. But also, I think we did then, and we still today struggle with the balance of the personal and the professional life. And no matter what, always more of the personal, whether, it's taking care of a house, taking care of children, taking care of
Mhm.
dogs, whatever it is, it always seemed like more of that was on the shoulders of women. And I think it's gotten better, but it certainly has not always been the case.
Not at all, and I think in some ways, readjusting to how we worked during the pandemic actually helped a little bit because it taught us how to work from home in a lot of cases, uh, so that you don't go into the office per se. I know one of my cousin, he works from home and his wife is a school teacher. So she's the one that gets up in the morning and leaves for work. He's there. They have 2 teenage kids. And so he's the one, if they're homesick, that is the parent at home. But 5, 10 years ago, that wasn't the norm. Thinking that that is becoming more prevalent, just because we've learned how to work from home. And part of that is the computer and Zoom and everything along that line. For television and film, obviously, if you're working on set, you can't do that from home. But
Right, right.
you can do a lot of prep from home. It's opened up somewhat.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Although I do think during the pandemic, there were a lot of women that had young children at home and they were
Mhm.
trying to work, and that was really crazy. And I was a TV reporter for 35 years, so my job was always out in the field. You know, a lot of women over a certain age, Shea, feel stuck. They feel unseen, irrelevant. Maybe they've lost a job, they've lost a spouse, they've, you know, gone through a lot of transformation, and they don't know if there's another chapter for them. I mean, what advice would you give women in that case?
I would say you have to take the bull by the horns. You have to say, I'm going to try. You may or may not succeed, but if you don't try, it's 100% no. If you try, 50%, 50%, yes or no. You may not succeed, but I think life is all about trying. I think life is about enjoying it and challenging yourself. I've always loved that. And I know a lot of that has to do with the way I was brought up and the encouragement of my parents. So I was very, very lucky. But I don't think we should allow society's perceptions of our age or our abilities to define us. It's hard. It is hard. I was driving yesterday and I go, what the hell are you thinking trying to raise the money, 2.2 million, to do an independent film at your age? You go through those times and the little gerbil wheel goes round and round where you just go, oh, so hard. Why? But then I go, why not?
Yeah, and I mean, you have to silence the negative voices in your
You
head.
do.
So you have obviously done so many cool things, as evidenced by your trip to Botswana. Anything on your bucket list besides getting your film made, finishing your book, besides those obvious things?
Right. I would say more travel. I was lucky my father was an airline pilot, so until I was 21, I got to fly for free, and my parents were very much, of the opinion that let's take as long as their grades are good, let's take them out of school because life is a better teaching environment than school. You have to have both, obviously, but they didn't say, well, you know, can't go on this trip as long as our grades were up. But there's still a lot of places I haven't been. And I just think the world is a fascinating place. And, I want to experience as much of it as I can. I mean, yes, I want to get the book published. I have to finish it. I'd really like to have the book published. I'd really like to get this film off the ground and in the can and then shown, because I think not only is it something that I think audiences would just sit down and enjoy, but it does have a message to it. But on the personal, it's enjoying life and exploring this world, basically.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything better than that. And I don't think anybody I've ever talked to for this show has not had travel at the very top of the list.
Absolutely.
Where can people follow your work?
Well, the short stories are published and available on Audible, Barnes and Noble. If you Google Shea Butler, I think you need to put my middle initial in. It should come up on that, or just Google the title Transition Stories of Mystery, Murder, and Speculative Fiction. And the short films are not out, but the web series is. And the web series is called Trouble Creek. So if you just go to YouTube, and it's youtube.com/Trouble Creek, all one word, and it's 7 episodes. And again, murder mystery, what can I say?
Well, I will put the links in the show notes. And thank you so much for being here today and sharing your inspiration, your encouragement, your wisdom with us.
Well, I don't know about that, but thank you for having me. It's been a real pleasure, and I love listening to your podcasts. So being
Well,
part
thank
of it
you.
is special.
I appreciate it.
Great.